My name is Rawlings. I'm responsible for our marketing activities across EMEA in the communications industry. And it's an industry I've worked in for quite a while. The title's a bit of a mouthful, I guess. Perhaps surprisingly, I work for Oracle. What I'm not going to be doing is talking about products. I'm not going to be talking about features. I'm not going to be talking about functions. And I'm certainly not going to be talking about maintenance fees. What I'm going to try and talk about is our perspective in terms of this customer transformation issue, the customer experience issue. And we're in a very great, respectful position in terms of being able to work with you across industries, fixed, mobile, whatever, across geographies, across the different sizes. And we also have the advantages as Oracle in terms of being able to share and work with our colleagues who do the same job as me, but in other industries. So I work with the people who are working with the retail customers, some of the people who we might consider to be best in class in terms of things like customer experience. I get the opportunity to work with people in the utilities sector, where I can gain their insights as to what they're trying to do. And these are the sectors which are often the enterprise customers of service providers. So it gives us a very interesting perspective. So I'm going to try and share those things. So I'm going to try and bring it together in terms of, well, what does it actually mean? And what does it actually mean in terms of trying to drive a transformation? But also where perhaps us as suppliers and vendors have an accountability to do things a bit differently in terms of moving this forward. So that's what I'm going to try and do. And in 20 minutes, and anybody who's ever seen me present, I talk. So it'll be a challenge to do in 20 minutes. I'm going to try and start from, I think I've got about a couple of slides. And you won't see a rigid block through this presentation, right? We're doing where are we today? What I've tried to do is touch upon all these subjects as we go through. Because I think we need to bed ourselves in where we are. We need to take a perspective in terms of, well, what things do we need to think about when we go on this journey to a different kind of customer experience? And then really enabling the moments that matter. And it's an interesting phrase. I had my parents down with me this weekend, and I have 2 children. And I remember something my mother said to me when the children were first born, which is, don't worry about the days, the months, the years. It's actually the moments that count. It's the moments that you remember. And unfortunately, as an industry, we often give lots of moments to our customers, which they remember, but aren't, unfortunately, ones we probably want them to remember. So it actually does come down to moments, and I'll touch upon that in the middle. So I think everyone's probably got their own version of this. Service providers in the room, I'm sure, have a beautiful spaghetti diagram of the BSS, OSS architecture that we have today, which gets even worse when you branch that out into the enterprise systems. This is my version of it. This is the data center of a service provider not a million miles from where you're currently sitting. And this is their reality. And it's just a visualization. However, it's a real one. And what does that mean to the customer experience? Well, the customer traverses all those drop cables. They live through all this stuff. And whatever experience that gives is the one they get. And as an industry, we talk a lot about innovation. We talk a lot about operational excellence. But I'd challenge us, when that's the reality of what the customers have to live through, when that's the reality of what the people in our business have to live through, how the heck can they innovate? Because to innovate, you need to move quickly. You need to realize things quickly. And that doesn't support it, unfortunately. So that's what we have today. I don't think that's new news to anyone, except it is the reality. And there's no point talking about things like coherent experiences, about innovation, unless we can address that, because it's a fundamental bump in the road in terms of making any of this real. Whenever anyone puts one of these slides up, they're always young people. Someone talked about the sort of like the teenagers going through to 30s. My father-in-law is more savvy than I am, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying he's in his mid-60s. So I think we often generalize about what this is about and who interest is in it. However, it is the reality. It is the reality because it's creating, back to those moments, a lot of very different moments of truth, moments of interaction. And it's creating an awful lot of expectations. Again, we've talked about consumer and enterprise, and I'm going to probably talk more consumer here. However, probably everyone in this room is an enterprise customer. My company pays my bills. However, I'm also a consumer. And there's this wonderful concept of transference. I transfer my consumer expectation to my enterprise expectation, and vice versa. And some things I find acceptable, some things I don't. And in the days of bring your own, I can use whatever phone, whatever computer, whatever thing I want on my corporate network. Create some interesting problems, all of which are driven by these kind of expectations. That's the expectations that the people have today. And I'll let you place yourselves across this spectrum for the service providers in the room. It's interesting, though. There is this direct line of sight from the kind of experience that we deliver to what actually happens in our business. And it's easy to jump on specific examples, but if you want to talk about dominating, and I'm not someone who worships at the temple of Steve. However, it is quite interesting to see, if we look at it from the kind of intended experience that Apple delivers to its customers, which is their relentless focus. Their focus is on experience. Forget the technology. It's about the experience that they actually deliver. They dominate that market. Interesting statistic. They have around about high teens globally market share. I don't know if anyone in the audience knows. Do you know how much their share of profit is in the industry? Anybody know? About 75. So from a high teens market share, they're commanding around about 75% of the profit in the industry. And at the end of the day, we're about profit. They're also doing quite well on revenue. And I would argue there's many, many aspects of that. It's because they have been relentlessly focusing at everything that they do. And we work with them, and it's tough to work with them because they relentlessly focus on these things which allow them to actually, ultimately, dominate. That's what they're about. So place yourselves on there. But I think, unfortunately, as an industry, we're probably more that end than this end. And that's our challenge. And I started off by sort of like saying what I'm trying to share is some of the perspectives we've gained from working with clients. And these are some of the things and some of the tools we use to try and drive into where we want to go, where we want to invest into our products, in order to try and change some of these things. So I don't want to just bring it down. This is one very simplified experience, and obviously more from the consumer perspective. And it's how, going back to that spaghetti, how the consumer has to live. And going back to the changed expectations, actually how they want to live in some ways. They want to go on this flyby through all the channels, through the actual way they go through and do these things. And they want to go through it and have the ability to change, not be fixed. And that's tough, because you need to know what they've already done. You need to know the expectations you've already set through these things. And it's interesting. We did some work down here, picking up the device in the local store. It's interesting. No matter how many different traverses I do of this, 90% of people, again, probably not us in this room, 90% of real people who pay out their own money still go to a retail store to touch it, to feel it, to buy it, because it's a reasonable sum of money. And the traditional sort of like mentality in service provider has been retail, not that important, it's actually high cost as well, so let's get rid of all those retail stores. Take you back to the Apple example where they spend an awful lot of money, the retail store. Why do they do that? Because you touch the customer. Where else do you physically touch the customer? Look at how much money they take out of your pocket in an Apple store versus how much money is taken out of your pocket in terms of additional services, in terms of add-ons in the typical service provider store. Not a lot, typically. But it's interesting. It all comes together, and it has to come together and be coherent. Otherwise, you're not delivering the intended experience. It's an accidental one at best. So what do we need to think about differently? This is one of the visualizations we use in terms of one of the things which needs to change. And this diagram, this infinite loop, this Mobius strip, whichever you want to give to this, there's a lot of things, and I could talk for probably a whole half hour just on this diagram, and I need to go a lot quicker than that. But this is what needs to be made real, and this is where I'm going to try and go in the conversations, because the challenge is, as soon as you allow someone to not move smoothly through this infinite loop, as soon as you allow them to not be offered the right thing at the right time, as soon as you allow them to be dissatisfied, then the loop stops, and they can get off. The more you can keep this loop turning by acting at the right time, working in the right way, offering the right thing, then actually it flows. The progression moves. That's the culture of people in terms of the way they pick, the way they choose. And this is one of the concepts we're trying to drive into the way our applications work. And it's a nice, easy diagram. And I'm sure you've seen versions before. Any decent management consultancy will have an equivalent. It's easy to draw a diagram. It's harder to actually make it real. This is a process we use called journey mapping, where we get in a room with our clients. This is before anyone's bought anything. Get in a room with our clients and try and map and try and understand what the journeys, what the moments need to be in order to differentiate their experience. And then we seek to try and align those journeys with what the products do. Because I think there was a conversation over here earlier today in terms of, well, if you want to spend an awful lot of money on a transformation project, take requirements. We spent money to try and invest capabilities into these products in order to enable these things. But you've got to know what you want to do and in what way and where the delta is. But it's fundamentally from a customer experience perspective. That's what those stickies are painting out and drawing through. It is complex, though. I'm not saying it's easy. Start with customer value. Nice phrase again. It's interesting, and I'm going to be slightly contentious, potentially. In an industry, in most markets, which is maturing, where typically there's 3, maybe 4 players, all with the required financial muscle in order to put the networks in place. Network very rapidly fails to become a differentiator. And so you've got to look for some of a sustainable differentiation to deliver revenue and margin. I struggle to work out how it's anything but the customer experience that's delivered in this industry. If for no other reason, there's a phenomenal opportunity in order to do this better than anybody else. But I think the days of the network being that differentiator are increasingly disappearing. And this is what it's going to be about. And it's going to be about understanding, yes, issues such as big data in terms of how you bring that kind of stuff together so you understand people better. What persona am I? How do I drill it through? But then actually making it real. And in this middle bit, I sort of said, where are we now? Some things to think about. We're well into the things to think about bit of this presentation. And in this middle bit of the presentation, there's a lot of words which typically we don't use as an IT industry. There's a lot of soft words, like emotions, feelings, because that's what the customer experience is about. And I'll go through a few slides here, which are kind of like about that, because it comes back to these moments and how you actually intend to influence the moments. Of all industries, this is probably one where we're data-rich and insight-poor. Phenomenal amounts of data. Do we really understand what our customers are trying to do? Do we understand how they're trying to do it? And actually, the important question, why are they trying to do it? Because that's situational. We need to ask ourselves and be able to answer that question. And that needs to drive the customer experience. We need to solve needs at very different levels if you want to deliver something which is different in terms of that experience. It's what's at the core. What are my interaction needs? How do I want to try and drive this forward? How do I actually, what are my emotional needs at this point in time? All soft, squidgy stuff. It's not code. It's not features, functionalities. It's what emotions are we actually trying to generate? Brand. Many companies all over the world trying to spend an awful lot of money on brand, trying to drive through what that brand stands for. The challenge for customer experience is you can spend an awful lot of money with brand consultancies, do a nice rebranding, turn green to red, whichever way you want to try and do it, but unless you transfer what that brand stands for into every single touch point of what you do, wherever you are on those brand goals, it's actually about alignment. It's not actually about the fancy stuff. It's actually about alignment and expectation management. And too often we raise the expectation level because we've not aligned our capability below it. And actually that can be sometimes harder to live with for a consumer and for us as a business, because we break promises. When you're up here, this looks very big. When you're at the back, it's not that big. I talked about the moments of truth, or those special moments. That's what's at the center of this. A moment of interaction. What's the consumer's intent? What are you trying to do from a brand perspective within the context of where they are in what they're trying to do, where they are in their life cycle? And it's interesting. You break it down, ultimately, they're after a result and you're after a result. It's as simple as that. Certain things influence it. And those key things that influence it here is attitudes and behaviors. Again, we're still in the middle, softy bit. It's not about IT. Attitudes. We care often, our KPIs, our metrics, are the things which are up here on the right of this slide, the things in red. That's what we're often measured by. Conversion rates, loyalties. Well, the things on the left are what actually the customers are thinking about. They're not thinking about the things on the right. Am I confident I'm making the right decision? If I am, then I'll convert. How do I make them confident? Do I believe that I'm getting value from them? Remember that whole journey through all those different channels, all those interruptions? Do I believe it? Is it credible? Am I going to turn into an advocate for this thing because of these other things that have happened? Each one of these flavor every moment. Behaviors. Same things, this time on the left. Conversion rate, loyalty, advocacy. And you can see how this starts to key through into things like scorecards. But actually, those are the actions, those are the behaviors of what someone might do. And it's when you combine the attitudes and the behaviors, you start to actually influence these things in a managed way, in an intended way. And that's the kind of like thinking process we're trying to put into some of the ways we invest into the way our products work. Great marketing slide. A great experience is a complete experience. And I guess if there's no other thing to take away from this conversation, I think this is one of the key things. That it's actually about coherency and completeness. Because that's what, as consumers, we kind of like want. We want our service providers to know us, but to then provide the right kind of experience attached to it. And there's lots of good things on here in terms of how you engage them, how you understand them, how you know them. And again, all nice soft words. But actually, they do want it. And that's where value is. But you've got to do it in the right way. And how do we make that real? So here, where are we starting from? A bit in the middle, the squidgy stuff in terms of things to think about. Trying to do a bit of a transition now into, well, how do we do things differently? One of the things we need to do differently is we need to fundamentally think about this experience across our business processes. And that needs to be the driver for what we invest in. That customer intended experience needs to be all the way across these things. And the sharp-eyed of you on my introductory slide will have seen we're very gratified to win an award from the TMF last year in Dublin, which was fundamentally about the way we're investing in that standards organization in terms of driving coherent business processes across these things. because it's the way it works, not just in one bit, but across all of it, which actually makes the difference. But we need to do this. We need to drive it across all the channel interactions, the channel coordination, order and revenue management, order fulfillment, all the way through. And the next build for this slide is starting to get into the IT world a little bit. These are the bits and pieces which are on our BSS, OSS architecture slides. It needs to come together in that way. It needs to be supported by data in a coherent way across all of those things. Knowledge in a coherent way across all of those things. These are the things we need to do. I'm not saying we're all there and we can get there overnight, but this is the way we believe we need to transform. Because at the end of the day, I think everyone would love to be in the position where Do is. I think there was gas in the room when people saw the EBITDA, which I think Do was putting forward. We're not all where we want to be. And the UAE is an interesting and very different market. But we're all measured by these things. You can be pretty sure everyone in the room is. And we're not doing good enough. We're not doing good enough. And I don't think if we go back to that slide at the beginning of it in terms of where is the customer on that sort of like spectrum from advocate all the way over there to not an advocate all the way over there, I don't think any of us would be happy with where we are on that. But you've then got to do it. And this is an interesting diagram. This comes from a piece of work that we did with PwC. And for many years, I stopped using the transformation word because it got politically incorrect to talk about transformation. I couldn't think of a better one, but it did, I think, if we're all honest with ourselves. I think we've all started using it again. And I think the reason is, you know, I'll say it slow, there's this terrible English phrase, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And it's, again, kind of like true. And so I think what we're all recognizing is, or what this piece of work put forward as well, and certainly we're seeing with the clients we're working with, they don't want to do what they've always done. They want to do something different. And when you transform, it is about hard questions, about complexity of IT across the horizontal here, and complexity of your business. And what that meandering line is kind of like saying is, what a lot of people have been trying to do for a long time is meander towards a different place. Totally understandable. You're the guys who have to stand up in front of the investment committee and prove why this thing's going to happen. I think what many, many people are increasingly starting to see is, well, given that actually it's not just our traditional competitors, it's actually people coming from different spaces with very different landscapes. Meandering towards somewhere different, especially when it's about customer experience, where the experience comes from coherency, you're probably actually never going to get there because you'll be constantly overtaken by events. And so what we're increasingly seeing is people making more step changes in their transformation, be that by domains, be that by coherency of a business process, which is one of the areas we would certainly encourage people to do, because that delivers a coherency in that customer experience, both internally and externally. We're seeing people make a lot more step changes, which bring their own challenges, but that is something we're absolutely seeing in the marketplace today. And it goes to extremes where we have certain of our clients who are literally, as part of these transformations, changing the job code of every single person in the company. And here I'm not talking about tier 3s, I'm talking about tier 1s. Every single job code in the company. That's the kind of step change which is coming through this. But it's a chasm, totally understand that. It comes together in something like this, where if you go with the argument that actually the sustainable differentiation which will drive revenue and margin is the customer experience that you can deliver, the intimacy that you can get from that, then it actually touches lots of different things. And many of these things we as Oracle don't play in. We don't play on network transformation, although a lot of our technology is embedded within them. We don't play in that. But that's the reality. The network is part of this answer, but it needs to come together in a coherent way. And we spend an awful lot of work with our clients thinking through the governance of what that actually means. Because I forget the lady who was talking in terms of denying all the change requests. It's key, it's fundamental. Because if you don't do that, you will just end up with what you've always done. And that's a governance issue. But it's governance around this whole connectedness of what needs to change. So this is what we're seeing. This is what we're trying to drive into what we do. What does it actually mean in terms of architecture? It means you actually need an architecture to enable experience. Not an architecture to get a bill out, not an architecture just to run a call center. You actually need an architecture for a different kind of house. Because the old house, you've kind of like outgrown, and it isn't really fit for purpose anymore. You need an architecture for a new house. And you need to think about that in terms of the horizontals, and you need to think about it in terms of the verticals. And how all these different activities come together. And there's a lot of slides behind this, there's a lot of detail behind this in terms of what it means, and happy to share it offline if anyone's interested. Kind of like coming to the close now. So I'm trying to just draw a couple of things together. Creating great experiences. It's what we're all actually here to do. No one sets out in any of their IT activities, any of the companies, to do anything but a great job. We just haven't quite understood the context of how we do that today and then how we make it real. But fundamentally, that great experience is the imperative thing which we want to try and wrap into this. Only complete experiences are great experiences. Go back to that, keeping that loop moving. If you stop it, it's not a complete experience. The only complete experiences are great experiences. You can flip it around as well. And someone was talking about knowledge management. Absolutely. Critical across all those channels. Critical across all those interactions. Critical to put it out there so people can actually self-care themselves. Lots of soft words in this as well. Dazzling. You want to dazzle people. That's tough when you get back into the day of running your billing cycles and driving these things through. But that's where people are trying to go to. And I will close in terms of, well, what does it mean for us? Because we have an accountability. Many of you people in the room will probably have some of our systems. I'd love to talk to you about having some more. We've been going on a journey to fill out this vision, to fill out a capability which is different. Are we all the way there yet? No. Do we absolutely intend to deliver on it? Yes. And this focus around customer experience, what it means in terms of internalizing to the assets, is what we're trying to do. Whether it's about knowledge management, whether it's about search, whether it's about call center, whether it's about billing, they should all be informed by each other. The processes need to be coherent across all of them. The data underpinning them needs to already understand and be cognizant of the other applications. The capability to run big data analysis against this and operationalize it into the processes without having to pay an SI big numbers to do that for you is where we want to try and go with this. If for no other reason, because we have it all in-house and the accountability is with us to do that. So that's where we're trying to go. And this is kind of like the thinking that I've gone through in terms of this is what we hear, this is what we need. Love a debate as to whether you disagree. This is where we think we need to try and go. Final invitation. If you like the sound of any of this, if you like the kind of discussions, one of the things we do is that kind of mapping stuff. And it's something to try and get a view in terms of what that experience needs to be. If you're interested in doing that, catch me at the end of the session. More than happy to do that. Or if you'd like a copy of the slides in terms of getting the data on it. So thank you very much for your time. And hopefully that has given you a bit of perspective. Happy to take questions.
Yes, Matthew. He's tough, this one.
Great model. Great how you pulled it all together and showed, obviously, the various solution
solutions that Oracle has. How real is that, though? This is a concept at this stage. Oracle's gone on a lot of acquisitions and mergers and lots of new tools and products. At the end of the day, they're disparate from lots of different vendors. How real is the vision you're trying to create there?
I think the vision is very real. If I go back, if I can go back just two slides. One more, please. The vision is very real. Next week, we have our global customer conference. We've got 60,000 people coming to San Francisco. I'm going to be there. I'd rather not, but one of the things which we're going to be keynoting there is elements of this. And it's not just going to be me, it's going to be Larry talking about this. And Larry's an interesting chap, but Oracle's an interesting organization in that we're very much an organization which drives towards Larry's vision. And so far, that's proved pretty successful. And so I think the vision, absolutely, is tight. In terms of, is all of that there today in the company? Absolutely, it's in the company, which gives us a responsibility and an accountability attached to them. Have we got it all supporting this vision today? No, we're on a journey towards that. How long is that going to take? I can't honestly say. What I do believe, otherwise I won't be standing up here, is I think you can hold us accountable for delivering on that vision. And I think the management of the company would say the same. Because if for no other reason, and here I'm going to go off script from a marketing perspective, it's actually in our own self-interest to do it. We spent a couple of billion on all this stuff. Every year we spend similar sums. If actually we want to get a return on that, we only do that if you want to buy more from us. And so I think we will deliver on this vision. And I think there's a lot of things we can point to as to how we're doing it. We're not all the way there yet, no.
Gordon Rawlings, thank you so very much.